Okay. So good morning to all of you. Welcome to this event promoted by Zero. It's the final day at the Portuguese Pavilion. So we and it's early morning in Portugal. So I don't know if any one of you is actually watching through the live stream, but definitely we're good to go. And today, first, my name is Francisco Ferreira. I'm the president of Zero, and Zero is basically promoting three events on here in the Portuguese Pavilion. And today we will talk about the role of sufficiency on the road to climate resilience. And our moderator from Publico, she just arrived from flying this morning, and she will be here within 5 minutes. But I think that we can actually start. We don't want to take much longer, and therefore I will for now take kind of role of both speaker and moderator, and therefore I'd like to ask the different speakers to come to the front, and actually we can take a moment from each one of us to present ourselves, what is our organization, and what is our role, particularly at European level, but also within the framework of these negotiations. So please have a seat. Erika Martinelli and Chiara Martinelli, and they're not sisters, even though they have the same last name. And also myself, Francisco Ferreira, will be part of the panel. Let's start and do this first introduction by ourselves, and then we will continue with Clara as soon as she arrives. Okay, maybe Chiara, maybe you can. Oh, you have to take this. Okay, Chiara. So let's start with you. Can you explain a little bit what is Can Europe? What is your role, and the relationship with this topic in a general as a general introduction?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, especially the ones from Portugal, since it's very early in the morning. So I'm Chiara Martinelli. I'm the director of Climate Action Network Europe. It's a network of more than 200 organizations in the European continent fighting dangerous climate change. So we bring together organizations like Zero, like Generation Climate Europe, meaning like from youth organizations to climate and environmental NGOs, social justice organization, development organization, and we try to all together position ourselves and bringing our messages and trying to influence European institutions mainly on our messages. So why sufficiency? I think there is no better place to speak about it in a COP. And that is already explaining why, as Can Europe, we embarked in this journey. I wanted to be very clear, also to manage expectations. It's also something new for the climate movement to go into more sufficiency language and reflections. So I will say we are here as Can Europe, definitely one of the teenagers in these discussions. We have been inspired by many organizations all around the globe, especially from the Global South, that have this concept and these messages much more traditionally at the core of their work. If you think, for example, in Latin America, to the concept of buen vivir, or Ubuntu in Southeast Asia, I think that is where, like, the whole message of the interconnectedness of the different crises we live has been inspiring us in developing these messages forward. So in a nutshell, when you say climate movement and sufficiency, is really about trying to go a step beyond on our very important fight to reduce emissions, but going a step forward in the sense that we would like to work to look much more and see how we can really shift the whole paradigm of the economy. And therefore, we are trying to develop a vision that we call the economy of tomorrow, meaning that we would like to bring sufficiency at the core in the sense of reducing also not only the emissions, but also the use of materials and resources, especially in the rich countries. Maybe I stop here for now and then we continue.
Erika, you can go ahead and explain how is your relationship, what is the nature of your organization and this relation between climate and sufficiency?
Yes, perfect, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Erika Martinelli and I am part of Generation Climate Europe. Generation Climate Europe, for those of you who don't know it, is the largest youth-led coalition in climate and environmental issues in Europe. We bring together more than 380 organizations in 46 different countries, and all of them together, they represent over 20 million young people in Europe. So it's a very big network. And I'm here as part, of course, of the delegation of Generation Climate Europe, and also in my role as project lead on resource justice. This is a very new team within Generation Climate Europe for the same reasons that Chiara mentioned in her introductory speech. We have seen that our economic model and the way that we have framed the green transition until now, it's reaching kind of an end point, because we are still starting from the assumption that economic growth can keep going infinitely and that our resources are not finite, which is not true. And for the same reason at Generation Climate Europe, we have asked our constituency and young people in Europe what they think about a post-growth model. We have done a survey a few years ago in 2023 to ask young people what they think. And we found out that actually there is a lot of, like a big consensus to move towards more sufficiency measures, especially when it comes to lifestyle changes. And at the same time, we translated this into a manifesto with policy priorities that we should include into European policies more broadly. And I think that it's also related to the discussions that we are having today at COP. As young people, when we arrived here, we wanted to keep our new habits going. But then when we went to the canteen, when we went to the restaurants, we've seen that this structural change has not happened yet. When we tried to ask for vegan, vegetarian options at the restaurants, we saw that there were not any. A friend yesterday actually tried to get a vegan option and he received beef. So he ended up chewing beef after asking for vegan alternatives. So I think that this is proof that even if young people, we are leading the way and we are trying to push for change in sufficiency, through sufficiency lifestyles, we are still facing structural change. And that's why we are here, I think, also today to discuss what we can do from the regulatory framework in Europe specifically. So I look forward to having this discussion with you.
Okay, let me also give a small introduction on the Zero point of view. When you, as you know, António Guterres is the Secretary General, and he is Portuguese, and both at the Biodiversity COP and here, he basically tells us that the main problem that we have with all these different crises is indeed the consumption model that we have. So that is basically the structural issue that we have to solve. We have an economic model that basically looks to more and more materials, more and more energy, and that is the main reason why we have the huge consumption of fossil fuels, the huge consumption of materials, and therefore we may come to agreements with finance, with mitigation, with a lot of things, but if we don't change that economic model, we don't go anywhere. So sufficiency is really the key topic when it just not and it goes beyond efficiency. It basically says we cannot have we cannot waste our resources. We really need to have issues of equality. We need to have to use the correct amount of resources to get a better life in terms of well-being, in terms of quality. And that's the reason why in Zero we have a team working only on sufficiency, because that is really the most critical and important problem that we have. Since Clara is still not here, I will continue in this double role of speaker and moderator. And what I'd like to ask you, Chiara, is how do you see, at least in Europe, how do you see through the European Green Deal and what is happening in the energy transition, with issues like the critical raw materials, with issues like the larger use of renewables and other topics? How can we actually combine this climate transition with the issue of not going above the sufficient use of resources? Like, are we really progressing in terms of selecting the right? Are we going through the right pathway with the acceleration in a lot of areas for the energy transition, or is this contradictory with sufficiency? I don't know if I'm sufficiently explicit, but the point is that a lot of people say, look, we need to have more and more PV panels. We need a lot more wind. We need a lot of. So we work a lot on more and more materials, more and more energy. And we don't know if that is coherent with this with a policy that looks at sufficiency.
Yes, thank you, Francisco, for this question. I would like also to hear what you think about it, because it's a big question when we discuss sufficiency. So I think this gives me the opportunity to start from one word we didn't mention that I think is important in our introduction. Everything starts when it comes to sufficiency to a very clear acknowledgement that there are planetary boundaries, and those planetary boundaries are almost exhausted, and we cannot continue at this pace of consumption and production. So I think this is very important to say, because it has a dimension also of fair share and justice, if you consider the whole globe, but it's also very important because of the question you are asking, Francisco, like, are we going in the right direction with the acceleration of renewables and the acceleration of the energy transition? So the answer is yes. We are going in the right direction because I think we are tackling one of the root causes of climate change, that is like our economy based on fossil fuels and we need to absolutely scale up the efforts on the decarbonization. But we need to make sure that we put at the core of this rollout of renewables, for example, we put, as you said, energy efficiency, yes, but also energy savings, meaning like a reduction of the demand of energy. And this is what sufficiency is about. It's a very tough job, because politically speaking, in my experience, speaking with policymakers in Brussels, like, no one wants to tell their constituency that you need to consume less. But this is basically what we will, at a certain point, we will not have the choice. And I think it's not what we are trying to do also with other organizations and many, like, it's also about the narrative that we need to build around this concept that is not based on having less or having a more difficult life, but it's about having a consumption style that respects planetary boundaries, that has a fair share at the core, but also that has like some more like mid-long-term perspective, and not just like an idea of resolving a problem just right now. Shall I go on more on the EU legislations? Or yeah, maybe just to say that we also are in a very important moment, because we can welcome. We can move forward, like I think, and trying to protect as much as possible what we got from the last 5 years of legislations when it comes to energy and climate policies, and making sure that the next steps will bring this what I call also dematerialization at the core of our European policies that have been rightly so very much focusing on the decarbonization of the different sector. So how can we combine decarbonization and dematerialization? And happy to go further in some examples of things we can do.
Yes, now we have Clara. Good morning, Clara. So we already ran a little bit here on the introduction. It was basically a first round. And Chiara already talked a little bit about this need of not only going on decarbonization, but also dematerialization. So she was the first in this second round, but now you are the moderator. So go ahead.
I'm so sorry for arriving late. I've just arrived tonight. What I'd like to know is the European Union going forward in the correct pace that you think it's correct to sufficiency, to achieve sufficiency goals in its policy? To whoever wants to respond.
So I just wanted to also add on what Chiara just explained. I think that a good framework that we should use always when we make policies on these topics and on sufficiency specifically is intergenerational justice and equity. Because, of course, if we take into consideration youth participation and we involve youth into the policy discussions, we're going to have better outcomes in terms of policy that is actually thinking about the future. And if we also consider policies' impacts on future generations, we will not have policy that is not including sufficiency at its core. So I think that that's something important we always have to mention, and that we also have to have in all the policy that we are discussing right now. In our case specifically, and I think it's related on what the European Union is pushing forward, we are focusing on critical raw materials policies this year in the resource justice team at GC. And in that area, we are seeing that, for example, the Critical Raw Materials Act that the European Union adopted last year, we don't have sufficiency targets. So this shows directly that even if we are moving forward in many policies areas, I would mention, for example, everything related to repair. So the Right to Repair Directive that is moving in towards sufficiency lifestyles, and so it's positive. We are still missing this overarching framework that allows us to put all these policies together to ensure that we are going into the right direction. In the case of the CRMA, for example, we are putting a lot of targets, nice ones, on recycling, on diversifying more the supply chain to make Europe stronger. But at the end of the day, the core objective is to get more raw materials, either from Europe, so from European countries, including Portugal with lithium, or also from third countries, kind of implementing the same economic model and development model that we have been seeing for the past decades. So I think that sufficiency, if implemented in the right way, can bring a different perspective to the table, and it can allow us to achieve this intergenerational justice that we are looking for as young generations.
Yeah, just to add a little bit, the problem that I see in Europe is that we are basically we felt the competition of China and the Inflation Reduction Act from the United States, and it's exactly what Erika just said. The appetite, the priority for Europe is to produce more, to have more renewable electricity, to have more raw materials to go into to support the climate and energy transition. But there is still not an equilibrium on providing what is. There's not sufficient investment on refraining that appetite to actually look at the priorities and the different principles of reducing, reusing and recycling, and of course looking at minimizing the waste. So there has been some good legislation, like in terms of standards, in terms of repair. Some of the legislation has been in that direction, but the priority is still on more instead of doing the same with less.
And do you see a good future with this new European Commission and European Parliament that's more on the right? And everybody says that well, maybe the Green Deal should have a little bit stop a little bit or go slower. Do you think that it will be possible to influence the legislation into putting sufficiency at the core?
Yeah, Chiara, I think it's
Yes, because we are there. And I think there is no possibility for regression. I mean, unfortunately, what we see in these days in Brussels and in all the political context is that there is really an attempt to fuel a narrative of like, we did too much, we accelerated too fast, we need to go slower. I mean, I think even the most convinced climate denier, at a certain point, will understand that this is not even a... Sorry. Does it work?
Yeah, it is working, but sometimes
Yeah. Okay.
find the right.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that, yes, we think it's possible, but it will be tough because we see like now in Brussels and many member states, really this attempt to a call for regression and also sometimes vested with the interest of simplification, very worrying word that we hear too much at the moment. So I think what we need to point the finger out and why I'm still optimistic is that this agenda that we are speaking about here, the sufficiency agenda, is a more convenient agenda, not only economically, but also socially. So this is the only way we will have, like in the next years, to bring people along. Of course, we need support, and we need support from policies, but we also need support in terms of resources. And I think there is also a very important element when we speak about sufficiencies that is a support on helping, and people like you can help us a lot, helping reshaping the narrative around that, around which kind of economy do we need for the people, especially the most vulnerable, but also for the planet. So I think maybe if I look at the next cycle of the European Commission, we do have, to build on what Erika said earlier about what has been done so far, what can we do now? I think we do have a couple of hooks where we can push this agenda further. One is the whole discussion around the famous climate targets 2040. So when it comes to the EU to define their targets for reducing emissions by 2040, we do have the possibility in that debate to exactly highlight what Erika said, that you also need clear targets about the use of materials. So maybe this is, I don't think, I'm not so optimistic, I don't think this will land in the climate targets 2040, but this discussion will help us to bring the need of targets also for use of materials. And then I think we have the opportunity with also this famous clean industrial deal that now everybody is waiting for, because many companies and businesses have been lobbying for, and it looks like it will be an instrument to help the people that have been earning more money in the last years to actually helping them to decarbonize their industry. Okay, I personally think they don't need a lot of help because they already have a lot of money. But if I do agree that we need policies that will help also industries to move towards a different industrial model that fit with people and planet. So in that discussion, I think again there are many tools and many promises also by President von der Leyen of legislations that we need to put in place, like the Circular Economy Act, that will help us to bring back those elements in legislations that are about the use of resources, are about the waste management, are about also, as I said at the beginning, the word nobody wants to say, reduction of demand.
If I can add on that. Yeah, I think that we need to make sure that in all these policies and also in the new Circular Economy Act, we don't fall into the trap of only focusing on waste. So when we talk about the waste hierarchy, we need to, of course, talk about waste, but we also need to find solutions to tackle the problem at the higher levels. That's why repair and other initiatives can help. And from what I've seen and we've seen from the policy priorities of the new Commission, there is the risk that we're only going to focus on secondary raw materials and waste. But we need, of course, to have a broader view. And I think that sufficiency will allow us to have this more systemic view. And in that sense, I think that in our case, specifically from GC, we see also as a great opportunity and a sign of hope the fact that the Commissioner has appointed a Commissioner for Intergenerational Fairness, and the fact we will have in the Commission a direct interlocutor with whom we can have this type of discussions. The fact that in the first 10 days she's going to have this dialogue with youth, that she's going to appoint a board specifically with youth advisors. So for us as youth, we see this as a great opportunity for us to have a concrete way of giving our input to all these policies. And I think it's a good sign, at least for hope, to move forward in this agenda.
Just to say that I think we're going to have a lot of conflicts in Europe related with sufficiency again, and we can start with Portugal. Like if you look at lithium extraction, for instance, or if you look at other type of materials, if we don't tell people that indeed we are just we're not wasting those materials and we're doing a huge effort to actually recycle some of those raw materials and metals. If we actually don't be fully, if we're not fully transparent on this emphasis on reducing the use of materials and energy towards energy and climate transition, people won't understand why we're damaging the landscape, why we are using areas that sometimes are very sensitive, and therefore that the argument of sufficiency is key for the acceptance by people at different European countries that we're doing an effort to minimize the impacts from social to environmental issues towards this fast transition that cannot cause more damage than continuing to use fossil fuels with all the consequences. So that's my key point. If we don't have the argument of sufficiency, it will be politically more difficult to have people on board.
And how do you better explain to people the argument of sufficiency? It's by means of intergenerational justice, or is there any other arguments that help people understand this and sell these arguments?
I will just add something on that, and I think that it's also the concept that we are seeing right now on competitiveness and strategic like autonomy, etc. Like we see in the current agenda that there is a lot of like a securitization of all these topics, and I think that sometimes we see it as a dichotomy between security, competitiveness, and environmental issues. And I think that's the sufficiency, and an argument that we can use to promote more sufficiency measures is to actually show sufficiency as a way to promote competitiveness and strategic autonomy from the European Union. Because of course, by relying less, by lowering our demand, we're going to rely less on these raw materials that we are importing also from third countries, and eventually this will lead us to be more sustainable, but also more resilient to whatever external shock that is coming our way.
Yeah, I fully support what you said. Maybe to add what we said at the beginning, I think people are ready also to hear that it's a matter of justice and it's a matter of fair share. And I think we need to say that, especially when we are in this at this global stage. Sometimes it's scaring or it's worrying if you say that, if you receive this message. But I think people are, especially, I'm sorry to go in a very sad part of the agenda, but I think especially when we are having also in Europe such devastating impacts of climate change, I think people are more and more ready to hear that also their lifestyle needs to change. So fully support on the competitiveness and that is going long term is going to be a more sustainable way of living economically and also in harmony with the planet. So for me, yes, on top of that, pointing the finger on justice, fair share. It's a limited planet. That we don't have another way to move forward. And then I think what is helping people, and that we see it a lot in Can Europe and in the work we are doing together, is sharing best practices. I think we cannot leave people alone to imagine what sufficiency means. I think we need to show that it's possible, it's good, it's fun sometimes even, and this will help bringing people along in the journey.
I don't have anything to add, to be honest. I fully agree with you. I think that we need those best practices, but at the same time, you have to have measures at the high political level. What I see from the mitigation paper that just came out this morning is that you have a lot of suggestions on the national level and those best practices. You're missing the ambition on the NDCs, the national determined contributions, and all that. And you have to have both. So that's my key point.
I would just ask one final question. Is the sufficiency agenda, what does the sufficiency agenda say to those who have a techno-optimist approach or a capitalist optimist approach to development and to the answers to climate change and the problems on the environment?
This time I start. Yeah, that terrorizes a little bit because I think that most of the technological approach is still directed to downstream instead of upstream in many cases. So I think that first we definitely I think it's becoming more and more consensual that we need to change behaviors. That is the key point of view. It's our mindset on respecting the planetary boundaries, on designing on our consumption. That is the key. And in many cases, we look at technological solutions that try to save us downstream. That's the easiest thing. And we want to have a structural change, and that goes upstream. So I think that technology is absolutely key. Circular economy features, of course, but I think we're still focusing a lot on looking at the end instead of the beginning. But
yeah, I mean, this is the key target for I think that we need to tackle in our discussion. I think the for this kind of what I sorry, I'm just trying to organize my thoughts. But what I always use when I have to speak with these people, I start with the fact that we do need. I mean, I just wanted to reassure them. Yes, we do also need technology. We do need technology. Actually, again, like going back to here, we do need much more transfer of technology from the global north to the global south. But I think we also need to be aware that we cannot base all our technological solutions on the same economic model that we have been using so far. That was a model based on exploitation of resources from the global north to the global south. I think this is always a little bit the entry point and the argument, and also again, like to bring it back, what is winning, like with this kind of target and people, bringing back the competitiveness element. Because we are not anymore in the 18th century, so exploiting resources in other continents for the European Union at the moment is having impact in terms of conflicts, in terms of migration, in terms of many other geopolitical elements that will make our life very difficult in the future. So I think this is where we need to find a good balance. And then, I mean, again, like technology, yes, but not to keep the same level of production and consumption that we have today. That will not be possible because the planet has limited resources.
Yes, and one last thought. I think that it's true. Like unchecked economic growth can actually lead to more instability and backlash in the long term. And as Chiara said, we have already seen it. So we need to find alternatives. And of course, when it comes to sufficiency, there can be alternative models of business models, if we can call them that way, that we can try. And I think that their youth and young people, entrepreneurs, can teach us a lot because there are a lot of good practices out there. There are already models that work, and I think that we need to learn from each other and generate spaces where we can share with each other this type of alternatives, also business models to go in the right direction. And I just wanted to go back to the point of transparency and the fact that we need to bring people on board. I don't know if someone is going to ask it later, so I'm going to mention that, yeah, because we always have this argument about youth and that, yeah, I'm part of youth, this big category, but it is also like another part of youth that maybe does not necessarily feel aligned with what I'm saying. And I think that bringing people together to the table and actually on board on this transition also means to engage with that part of young people, because I think that as youth, we are facing housing crisis, high unemployment rates. We are facing, I mean, we are on the front line in that sense, and sufficiency could be the argument that we can use to bring them on board if we have the right incentives in place, if we have the right regulatory framework that allows us to move in that directions in terms of lifestyle change, etc. And one last thing, I think that the current regulatory framework that we have, especially when it comes to critical raw materials, is not reflecting this, like the need of more participatory involvement of communities, of youth, but also in the third countries with indigenous communities there, for example. We don't have, for example, in the standing board of the Critical Raw Materials Act, we don't have representation of youth of civil society, and our opinion is not mandatory and is not even requested, so they can decide whenever they want us to be there. So I think that there is so much to do, also with the current policy, to include our voices and to make sure that people feel like they are sitting at the table. So we need to make sure that we ask also the European institutions to deliver on transparency and to stand up to the highest environmental standards that have been delivering until now, even if we are in a very difficult geopolitical and economic context.
I'd open the floor to some questions. One question. Miguel Miranda.
Okay, many thanks for this panel. because I do think that sufficiency is probably one of the most important topics in the future. But I have two very fast questions. First, do you think that the European Commission is perceived by people as a symbol of sufficiency? Question mark. Second question, when we are talking on sufficiency on critical materials, for example, in some cases, Europe does not have sufficient amount of raw materials. What can we do without harming the South?
Well, first of all, let me give the congratulations to Zero to organize this panel. Very good discussion, and of course, beside two persons make questions, I will make two questions. Okay, very quickly. Well, first of all, considering that we have the growth of population, well, expected to 10 billion or 11 billion people, how can we, well, have this sufficiency into the sustainability and to the climate resilience? And if you defend the degrowth, for example, and at the same time, well, it's not a question in reality, but it's a comment about the Critical Raw Materials Act. In fact, in Portugal, the participation of the communities is already guaranteed in the Portuguese law. So I think that it's a good standard indeed to try to have this framework for all European countries, of course.
Okay, I have the microphone. Maybe I take the first one because I love it. No, it's not the symbol of sufficiency for me, the European Commission. Definitely not. But I mean, I'm a European project believer, and I think I'm inspired by the vision that is coming out of this project. But I think if we look at the history of Europe, the more transformative ideas and legislations that came out didn't come from the offices of the European Commission, but they came from people across the member states that have been having ideas and have been pushing those ideas from the bottom up.
I completely agree with Chiara regarding the European Union as such. I mean, we know that our material footprint is very high, much higher than, of course, developing countries, and it's actually double what it is required to stay within planetary boundaries, and it's projected to grow even more in the next decade. So clearly, we are not following sufficiency. Otherwise, we would not be in this situation. And regarding raw materials and the impact on third countries, I think that one first good step, more than just thinking about alternatives to the raw materials that we are using right now, it's to actually just follow the rules that we have already in place. Because the problem with all this rush towards raw materials is that we are actually putting in danger the same environmental standards that we have upheld until now. And we are actually trying to make, for example, the approval of strategic projects faster without going through the same checklist in terms of human rights and environmental assessment that we need. So I think that the first step, not to harm anyone, is to follow the standards that we have already in place and not make any derogation when it comes to them. And in the case of the Global South, of course, it's about involving them in the process. And I think that this is something that as EU Raw Material Coalition, which EC is part of, we are pushing forward. So more transparency, but also more involvement of communities in the decision of the project that have to go forward. Because for now, strategic projects in the context of the CRMA are decided behind closed doors.
Yeah, just to add on the last comment from Josh Christine. Yes, I think it's crucial for people to get involved through the legislation of each country, and and again, it's a good argument for Portugal or for Europe to actually have. You know, we have environmental impact assessments. We have a lot of standards that. And one of the arguments for us, for instance, to take those raw materials in Europe is that if we do that, We know that we are much further in terms of sustainability compared with the others. We just need to have, however, a global framework of transparency, of use of these tools, and not just go and grab what the market gives us. One final word on all these issues of sufficiency is that, and let me pick on the lithium, for instance, it's much cheaper to actually get raw lithium than to actually use primary or secondary waste materials to actually recycle them. So that is in the Critical Raw Materials Act. We are supposed to use part of it. The percentages should be higher, but one thing that works against all this sufficiency argument is the price. And currently, the price sustains or promotes the use of the primary materials, of the raw materials, instead of promoting the circular economy and promoting sufficiency. If we don't change it, we're not going to get anything. Price, unfortunately, in our capitalist society, is absolutely key, and this is just the only reason why we have this, is because the prices do not reflect the impacts. If the prices would actually reflect the impacts, we would not have this offer with such a difference between getting 1 kilogram of lithium from the raw material and 1 kilogram from the recycled materials. And I think we're over.
Yeah. Thank you.
Claro.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Okay. Obrigado, Clara. Sim, okay.
The cost determines the price.